Welcome back to Black Bear Forge and our countdown till Christmas. The big day is getting closer all the time, and we're running out of time to make simple projects for Christmas gifts. But most of these projects are appropriate any time of the year, so don't feel like you have to just make them for Christmas. A lot of these would be popular items for people that attend rendezvous and other living history or reenactment events, SCA type events, things like that. Today's project is one of those, and this is going to be a blanket pin or a brooch. I think it's called a Penanular brooch. I may be pronouncing that wrong. And it's a semicircular brooch with a pin on it that when you put the pin through the blanket and rotate the brooch around, it locks everything in. And that way you can use a blanket as a shawl or a cloak without having to sew anything special onto it. So it's pretty simple, 2 pieces, no hardening, tempering, nothing like that. I'm going to make the main part of the brooch out of a piece of 1/4-inch square bar that is 8 inches long. And then I have some round bar that we'll make the pin out of. The most important thing here is probably that this pin is somewhat delicate and very smooth, otherwise you're liable to damage the blanket. This should not leave a hole in the blanket. If you put it on a shirt like this, you would certainly leave a hole in it because you're poking essentially a nail in there. But you don't want this to be some big monstrous thing. You want it to be gentle on the blanket or weaving that you're using so that you don't ruin it. This project was suggested by Brent Books and Bob Rees. Thanks for the idea. First thing I want to do is put a nice graceful taper in this. I think I want to taper about 1/4 of it out. And you can certainly do these out of round bar if you wanted to. But I think this will look good with a twist, so I chose to use square bar. But I am going to knock the corners down on this taper. Now this will eventually get a little curl on it, but I may wait till we're done with it just to make it easier to shape this. Now I want to put the same taper on the other end. And this also gives me the ability to compare this end and this end without the curl. It'll be easier to get these to match. I don't know if you notice it when you're watching these videos or not, but you should watch the tongs and the tong hand as much as you watch the hammer hand to see when I turn it. So a lot of this I'm turning at 90 degrees every blow, and that can be important. So it's a good idea to keep your eye on everything that's going on, not just watching the hammer go up and down. I'm going to get a pair of dividers and check the length. So here's my original. This one needs to come back about 3/4 of an inch. And I'm leaving nice crisp edges in the middle because I'm going to twist the entire center section. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And that's the next thing we want to do. I'm going to get the torch out because I have a feeling this will cool unevenly once it's in the vise, and I want this to twist as evenly as possible. I'm going to start right at the edge of the taper. You can already tell this outside edge is cooling off a little bit faster. I want a fairly tight twist here. may need to just either take another heat or keep it hot with a torch throughout this whole process. But in use, I want this to sort of behave like it's really a round bar, and that's the reason for the tight, nice tight twist. Using the torch like that really does help. I think that's going to work. The next thing I want to do is go ahead and bend this into the semicircle. Now you can certainly do this over some kind of a form, but if you do that, you're liable to really mess up that twist, and I would just as soon keep it looking nice and pretty. So I'm just going to do this mostly by eye here. I may compare it to something appropriately round before I'm done. And I want it to kind of come in, not just horseshoe shape, but I want the circle to start to close. It's getting there. Now if you do choose to work over a mandrel of some sort, use a rawhide mallet and you'll be less likely to mess things up. But I'm not going to work the twist end. It's actually very nice right now. I'm very happy with the way that's coming out. Now I don't know if this is too big or not. I don't know if there's a magic size for these things. This is just what I'm coming up with. Like I say, I've never made one before. I'm going to set this aside for now. This will eventually get the curls, but I want to make the pin part next. For that, I've got 1/4 inch round bar. I'm going to draw out a very nice, smooth, round taper. This is the part that actually pierces the blanket, so you don't want it to be snaggy. I will probably clean this up quite a bit cold, either with a file or the grinder. But I think it needs, in use, it needs to span all the way across the brooch. So that means I want my taper to come clear up into here somewhere. So I'll keep working this taper back until it's pretty close to what I want. And that's about right there, so we'll round that up. You just go to octagon there. And then as smooth around as you can make it. Like I say, it's worth filing. But the smoother you can make it with the hammer, the less filing you'll have to do. So that's what we want there. Then we need to make a ring on this so it goes onto the brooch portion. And to do that, I'm going to determine how much pin I want. And to find a visual reference here, I'm going to do some half-face blows to thin that out. I want it, about 1/8 by 1/4 here, maybe a little thicker than 1/8. Just something I can roll into a little ring. This ring needs to be big enough for nice, smooth pivoting fit on this 1/4 square bar that we twisted up. So let's go ahead and cut this off. I'm going to need a little bit more than 1 inch of material to make a nice pivoting ring here. We'll clean that up, but that should give us what we're after. I want a fairly consistent thickness here. I want to knock the corners off. Now I think here again, this is something worth doing some filing to make sure there's no sharp edges around this. So I think before we do anything else, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to create some nice round edges on there. I think an angle grinder would be overkill for this, but if you got a belt grinder and you're comfortable doing delicate things on it, that would work. And I feel just a little sharp place right there. Much better. This ended up nice and smooth, so I don't need to do very much filing to the pin at all. I know my arm is in your way, isn't it? Someday I'll get an overhead mount for the vise. So I can put the camera right overhead. Then my hands won't be in your way when we do this. Yeah, I'm real happy with this. Now we need to put the ring on. Now we just want to form the ring on here. My goal was to put about a 3/8 ring on here, which should go over that 1/4 inch square bar twist. So with that in mind, I have a 3/8 drift I use for hinges, and we'll put that in there and clean this up. So we'll put that pin in there. A little tapered piece is a little hard to hold on to. Just going to clean that up around the pin. The pin is nice and loose, so I don't have to worry too much about being undersized, I don't think. So let's see if it fits. It fits just perfectly. Almost like I planned that out. So now to keep the pin on the brooch, because we don't want this to fall off when it's not in use. It should stay fine when it is in use. I want to put 2 nice little curls on here with the pin in place. And that should trap the pin. And for that, I just want to use my round nose scrolling pliers here. I think that's the most reliable way to do that. And that will still come off, so we need to make that a little bit bigger. That's the advantage of these pliers, is they are tapered, so we just come further up the jaw here, get another grab, and do that, and just put a bigger ring in. And since everything's hot, we use tongs to check this, and that's not going to come off now. So let's do that size to the other side. So put that in there to the same distance, roll it around. Now I immediately see a problem here. That is not as far around as I would like it to be. And that's really too bad. By putting such big curls in there, we've lost some of this. So I think we're going to go back to the mandrel, and we are going to try and shrink this up a little bit and make it a little bit tighter bend, which might be better because I thought this looked too big anyways. Now before we go to the mandrel, I'm going to go back to the bending fork and get it as close as I can to what I want. I think that's much better. Now we'll put it on the mandrel to true it up. And luckily the tong grooves on my mandrel give me a place I can put that pin. Things like this are just trial and error the first time you make them. Second time they're mostly trial and error. But after a while you get all the little issues figured out and they start to go pretty smooth. I like that shape better. And I thought this curl looked like it needed to come in just a little bit. I think we can round those up just a little bit cleaner. This is something that if it's lumpy and bumpy and odd shaped, I think it's really going to show. So you want to do as clean a job forging and dressing this as you possibly can. But I believe we are done. I only have one more thing that concerns me at this stage, and that's just because we made this a little smaller diameter. Is this pin too long? I don't think it really is. I think it would be fine like that. But if you don't like it, you can always cut it off and file it down to a little bit keener point there. So I'm going to let this cool, and then I'm going to power wire brush it because of the forge scale. This red color is essentially rust, but it comes from the propane forge because a propane forge puts a lot of water out as it burns. It's just a byproduct. Hard to believe it can be a fire in there and still have a lot of water vapor, but there is. Something like this can be really grabby on a bench-mounted wire wheel, and it's nearly impossible to safely get into the inside. So I'm going to use a little cup brush on a die grinder. That cleaned that up much more safely. And I think I'm going to go ahead and put this back in the forge real lightly. I don't want to give it time to build up more of that scale, but I want to go ahead and blacken it. But if you like that finish, leave it just like that. Well, that was a fun little project. A blanket pin, or a penanular brooch, I believe they are really called. In use, the way this works is that it separates the weave of the blanket. And this denim, it's actually piercing it, so it wouldn't be good for something like this. But a blanket, it can go in between the threads and not actually cut them. And like this, it doesn't really do any good. But when you turn it this way, now that can't come out accidentally, so that keeps everything nice and secure. And by doing so, you can wrap up in a nice warm blanket and use this to pin the two sides together as they cross your shoulders. And that way you don't have to hold the blanket up here and only have one hand free while you're trying to do some work around camp. A very useful project if you use a blanket as a wrap sometimes, or if you have a blanket style coat like a capote. I'm not sure on the size. I have no idea what sizes these were in historically. Something I may need to research, and if I find out this is way too big or way too small, we may do another one sometime in the future. But in the meantime, I hope you like that project. Give it a thumbs up. I know I enjoyed doing it. If you haven't done so already, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button. Feel free to watch some of the other videos and share the videos with your friends. If you'd like to support the channel financially, there are links down in the description to both PayPal and Patreon. Those are merely donations. The content is free and will remain free. But then make time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next one.